This is a short video where we will be looking at breach of duty of care. Remember that in order to establish negligence under tort law, it is vital that the plaintiff demonstrates these three elements that you see on the screen. So the plaintiff has to establish that the defendant owed the duty of care, and that duty of care is recognized by the law. And the second aspect is the breach of duty, and then finally that the plaintiff suffered material damage, and that damage was because of the defendant. And that's what we label as causation. So this video is concerned with this second element, breach of duty. Once the plaintiff establishes that a duty of care exists, they need to show that that duty of care was breached. And the duty of care, remember, is established based on the salient factors or features that we talked about. In most situations, it's established due to the presence of a special relationship. So the plaintiff and defendant, they fall in a category of relationships that we had discussed in a previous video. Now the plaintiff, in order to establish the breach of duty, the plaintiff has to prove that the defendant did not take reasonable care. So there was a risk, and that risk eventuated, and the defendant failed to take reasonable care to prevent that risk from eventuating and hence harming the plaintiff. And in terms of the standard of care that is required of the defendant when it comes to establishing the breach of duty, the standard of care is that of a reasonable person in the defendant's position. So a question that the court would ask is, what would a reasonable person have done, assuming that that reasonable person is in the shoes of the defendant? So for professionals, when we're talking about the construction industry, for instance, we're assuming that, the builder, the engineer, the architect, these are all professionals. And so their actions are assessed based on maybe how others, other professionals, similar professionals in the field, would have viewed the position of that, defendant in a case. Did they act in a professional way? Was it reasonable, the manner in which they reacted to the situation? And these are some of the, the questions that the court would need to examine in order to establish that breach of duty. So breach of duty, when we talk about it, we're talking about the breach of duty of the defendant. So the plaintiff would need to prove that it was the defendant that failed to take reasonable care, and because of that, there was a breach of duty by the defendant.